A very warm welcome to you. Many thanks for joining us again on Almond Finance and Wealth Reports this week. As you know, we are source for latest happening information in the financial sector of the nation's economy. My name is Faith Wade. On this edition of the program, we'll kick off by bringing you the continuation of our exclusive interview with Madam Prisca Suarez, the Secretary General of the African Insurance Organization, AIO, that was established in 1972. She will be sharing with us the efforts of the AIO at developing the insurance industry on the continent of Africa. Plus, recently, the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, LCCI, put together a stakeholders forum on the private companies conversion and listing bill that has passed its second reading at the lower house. The bill seeks to compel the mandatory conversion of private to public companies whose shareholders' funds are in excess of 40 billion naira, or companies whose annual turnover are in excess of 80 billion naira, or companies with total assets in excess of 80 billion naira. As expected, industrialists, investors, and stakeholders in the organized private sector turned out in their numbers for the stakeholders forum. These are more what we have for you on the lineup this week, so I urge you, as always, to sit back, relax, and spend this time with us. But all the details are coming to you after this break. Please stay with us. Another important area that I also want to ask a little bit of question about is the area of takaful insurance. Oftentimes, when people talk about micro-insurance, what really comes to the mind of those who are not interested in conventional insurance is takaful insurance, and that also is a very big business in the Asian countries like Malaysia, for example. So, what is the AIO also looking at ways to develop takaful insurance on the continent?
Yes, we did throw the spotlight on that in Sudan, the conference in Sudan, and prior to that we had like the life insurance seminar, which took place just before that seminar, also looked at takaful. It is also, like you said, it is doing very well in Malaysia. Unfortunately, the experience we have had in Africa thus far is that it hasn't, it's not done as well as has been expected. Recently, I was discussing with some practitioners in Tunisia, and they also said that, well, it's probably because, it's not profitable, because it's not profit-oriented. And meanwhile, people who invest in business
want to make profit.
They want to make profit. And it's something that the profit would be on a longer term. And, you don't really, it's not a kind of business that generates a lot of profit. So I think that's the reason why. I'm aware that perhaps about 10 years ago, a company in Nigeria tried to introduce takaful, but they really haven't done much. Sudan is probably the biggest market in Africa, but even there, as I said, they're not doing so very well, because if you talk to the takaful Re company that Africa Re set up, for instance, the business is not doing as well as it should. I suppose what needs to be done, considering that it is an important class of business also, especially for Muslims who would not want to buy conventional, like life policies, for instance, for religious reasons. Takaful is the kind of insurance policy that they can easily buy. So I think maybe we need to perhaps do some research into that and find out how to be able to sell that more to people, so that at least the business will grow as it has done in Asia.
Okay, now moving on. I do know that the AIO is very significant in terms, like most African governments takes the AIO seriously. Now, what is the organization doing that in a way that they can use insurance to get people out of poverty. I ask that because now governments in Africa are talking, especially in Nigeria, for example, they are talking about financial inclusion, bringing those who are not in the financial system into the system. And a lot of people have advocated the fact that insurance would actually be the best bet to drive financial inclusion.
As far as financial inclusion is concerned in the area of insurance, I think the best way we can do it is through microinsurance, because we can't possibly sell the conventional personal line policies, for instance, to people in the rural areas, you know. So whereas you can sell microinsurance to them, and what has been done, there's some policies in a place like Kenya, for instance. What they have done with some of the policies is to sort of build a savings aspect into the policy, so that, you know, people are paying a small amount, maybe on a weekly basis, and you know, they know that there is something that they will get. So I think it's a question of looking at the needs of each area that you're dealing with, because you cannot just import lock, stock, and barrel what is happening in Zambia, for instance, and take it to Ghana and expect it to work. But what you do find is that there's some of the experts, you know, in microinsurance, who have worked in different places and who have experience of what's happened in Asia and what's happening elsewhere. So some of that can actually be used to some extent to create policies that will suit the needs of people in different parts of Africa. I mean, there's some, if I use an example of a policy that sells in South Africa, for instance, sells very well, is the funeral. But come to Nigeria and try to sell funeral, and people would not find it funny at all. In fact, recently I heard about a country that's doing it, but what they've done is to sort of disguise it. They call it by another name.
Okay.
So I think you need to really understand the culture and the sensibilities of a particular area where you're going to sell a policy to, so that you can design something that will be attractive for them, and something that you know that they do need. And I mean, something like that, it is something that's, because in Africa it's like, we do spend a lot of money, yes, but everybody wants to go to heaven, nobody wants to die. So you don't want to go and sell a death or funeral policy to somebody. But really, I believe that with microinsurance, I think we really need to work hard at it, and if we do that, we'll be able to bring in, I think the governments of the various countries in Africa, all the countries in Africa, will get very close to achieving financial inclusion, insofar as insurance is concerned.
Okay, now in the 43 years of existence of the AI, would you say the African governments, have been supportive of the objective of the AI in terms of laws or policies in various countries as regards the insurance industry?
Well, let me say yes, by and large. The countries' governments have been supportive. Certainly the government of Cameroon has been very supportive in providing headquarters for AIO in Cameroon and giving us all the facilities to be able to work. As you would imagine, most of the work that we do, or whatever it is we do with governments, we relate with the supervisory authorities, because they are the representatives of government, so to speak. And I'd say that a lot of them really are coming up with policies that support the development of insurance in Africa. One of the problems that we have had is that of small insurance companies. And many countries have come up with laws to strengthen the market. There have been recapitalization exercise in various in countries. So what we intend to do is to continue to work through the supervisory authorities. The AIO has an association of African insurance supervisory authorities. They meet regularly during the annual General Assembly of the AIO. So through them, we will try to achieve some of these goals, changes that are necessary in the insurance sector. Yes, we'll continue to work with sensitize the supervisory authorities, because in some cases you'd find that perhaps some are not aware of what is happening in other places. I can give an example of a project which we're working on right now. We found that there's been the incidence of what I call premium flight from Africa. A lot of projects that are carried out in Africa, you'll find that the insurance is done outside of Africa. And there are some countries that have regulation to the extent that a certain amount, a certain percentage of the business should be insured in the local market before anything is taken out. Not every country has that. And so what we're trying to do is to find out the extent that this affects insurance, the insurance sector in Africa, and then engage the supervisory authorities and possibly also finance ministers to bring to their attention what is happening. I think by so doing, those countries that have not such regulation in place will at least learn from others. And you know, they can also do that. I mean, we're not advocating protectionism. As I said before, we cannot. Insurance is essentially an international business, so we cannot just close up and keep everything here. But then we do need to create capacity, and that I think we have done to a large extent. But we need to utilize that capacity before going outside of the continent.
Okay, now moving on. The Ebola outbreak, no doubt, has put the continent to a great test. What would you say are some of the lessons that the insurance industry has learned on the continent?
Well, it's still an ongoing thing, and I think we are maybe going to learn, or we are maybe learning what it is. It has affected business to a large extent. For one thing, 2 of our annual events last year, the Life Insurance Seminar and the Reinsurance Forum, were cancelled because of the Ebola outbreak, because people, could not travel freely. But what we're trying to do is to actually gather information. One of our member companies in the worst affected countries is actually doing that for us currently, and by the time the AIO magazine is published, we would have received information on that. It's something that nobody expected to happen, but we cannot say that it's over yet, much as everybody would want for it to be over. We need to be realistic. We never can tell. It can hit in another place. And we need to know, for instance, because if somebody took a medical insurance policy, for instance, 5 years ago, nobody knew that anything like Ebola would come up. To what extent would the policy be affected? Also, when we look at, because the purpose of insurance is also to protect people, and be able to provide for them when the unforeseen happens. We need to also prepare ourselves to see how do we protect the insuring public. How do we structure policies, our existing policies, or do we need to
get new policies?
Yes, and also at our conference coming up in May, it's one of those things we're going to be looking at. The theme of that conference is insurance in Africa faced with, or in the face of mass events. So we're looking at political violence, we're looking at catastrophic risks, and very important also, the growing incidence of
insurgency.
Yes, illnesses or diseases such as we have Ebola. Polio was something that we thought was a thing of the past. Now it's an issue. So it's one of those subjects, very important things that we're going to examine, so that at least we prepare ourselves, and then we also see how we can support our economies, because at the end of the day, these events have adverse effect on the economies of various countries, and insurance is the backbone of any economy, so we need to be prepared.
Okay, Ma, I actually mentioned it a little bit. There's been a rising wave of insurgency on the continent, from Kenya to Nigeria to other parts of Africa. So looking at that with vis-a-vis the performance of insurance, is there anything that the AIO is also doing or looking in that direction?
Yes, we have focused on that. In a couple of conferences, we focused on that. We also considered actually the possibility of perhaps setting up an insurance pool for such risk. But considering that we're currently also working on the creation of natural catastrophe risks pool, we want to sort of concentrate on that and have that taken care of before we also look at that. But having said that, it's something that's very much on the table. It's on the front burner. As I said, it's one of the things that we will discuss in Tunis in May, by the grace of God, because really it's like no part of Africa, just like I say, no part of the world is spared from it.
Conversion and Listing Bill 2013 was read for the second time in the House of Representatives in July 2014. The bill seeks to compel the mandatory conversion from private to public and listing of all private companies that meet specified thresholds in all sectors of Nigeria. The bill seeks to force mandatory conversion by making it an offense for the companies and its directors that do not convert. It also seeks to grant tax incentives along with some reliefs on stamp duty and registration fees. The Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, LCCI, in its usual proactiveness, put together a stakeholders forum to brainstorm on the private companies conversion and listing bill. The purpose of the forum was to articulate the views and perspectives of industrialists, foreign investors, and the business community, with a view to harmonize the position of the organized private sector on the bill. Welcoming participants to the forum on behalf of the President of LCCI, Dr. Mrs. Nike Akonde, said that their preliminary review shows that the bill may lead to considerable loss of revenue to the government.
Our preliminary review of the proposed bill shows that it will likely impact on local and foreign investment and the broader economy. It may also lead to considerable loss of revenue to the government and breakup of companies to circumvent the requirement of the bill. Also, the Nigerian Stock Exchange may not have the depth and liquidity needed for the investment arising out of the mandatory listing of these companies.
The bill under consideration before the House seeks to compel private companies whose shareholders' funds exceeds 40 billion naira or whose annual turnover exceeds 80 billion naira or its total assets exceeds 80 billion naira to convert to public liability company and get its shares listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Making his presentation, Barrister Bimbo Atilola, Deputy Chairman Commercial Law and Taxation Committee, LCCI, said that the tax incentives under the bill is discriminatory.
The tax incentives contemplated by this bill, in my view, is discriminatory and unfair because it is only available under the bill to those companies that get listed compulsorily by the regime of the bill and not available to those companies who by business decision have decided to go public voluntarily. So what this suggests is that if business expediency suggests that I should go to the floor, and I've done that, and I'm meeting my listing obligations, all these tax incentives I will not enjoy. But somebody who did not want to get listed, but who got listed because it's compelled by the regime of the act, will now enjoy all these tax incentives.
Speaking from the perspective of the Nigerian Stock Exchange, Mr. Kola Adieko, Head Corporate Services Division, said that the exchange is against the concept of compulsion in the bill.
The whole concept of compulsion, for one, we disagree with. Our belief is that we have the burden to prove to companies, to demonstrate to companies that it's in their best interest, as it suits them, to list on the exchange. I cited a few examples of the reasons why companies would consider listing. We think there's still enough of a good story there that would convince companies at the appropriate time to list as opposed to compel it. Because I think the whole concept of compulsion goes against the grain of free enterprise. It should purely be an economic decision that companies make on their own as to when they want to list.
Other speakers were Mr. Muda Yusuf, DG LCCI, Mr. Dick Kramer, and a host of others. Many believe that the passage of this bill will ultimately take Nigeria backwards in terms of what Nigeria has achieved in establishing itself as a country that encourages unrestricted investments since the inception of the NIPC Act. The passage of the bill would no doubt change the current situation by imposing stringent regulatory requirements along with criminal obligations.
All right, that's our time on this edition of the program. I thank you so very much for being a part of it. Don't forget you can always reach us on 017763981 or 08033357879, or better still send us an email almond4xx@yahoo.com or almondproduction@gmail.com. You can also visit us on our website almondreport.com. Like us on our Facebook page, Almond Finance and Wealth Reports, and view past episodes of this program on our YouTube channel, Almond Reports TV. Join us every Wednesday by 9:45 a.m. live on Niger FM 102.7 for our Pidgin English program called Waiting Insurance They Do Save. My name is Faith Ogwade. Until same time, same station next week, when we'll come your way with a fresh package of this program from all of us here. It's goodbye.